Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with two very special guests. Our guests today are Catherine Weissenberg and Jocelyn Montanaro, and they're here to share with us their new book, Beyond Ever After, a heart-to-heart journey through death and the afterlife. Now, for several decades, Catherine has been sharing her unique ability to communicate and dialogue with God, the deceased, and coma patients. To retain a lasting record of these communications, Catherine writes the conversations in longhand as they occur, calling them writings. Jocelyn has a bachelor's degree in international studies and a law degree. She was a lawyer working with divorcing couples, criminal defendants, and in general litigation. With some surprise and apprehension, as a selected messenger, she welcomes the reader into the story of her life just before and after Kevin's death. So let's welcome to the show Catherine Weissenberg and Jocelyn Montanaro.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for having us.
You know, what an honor it is to have the both of you here and to talk about your new book, Beyond Ever After. I mean, I have to ask you, what inspired you to write this book at this time?
Well, Jocelyn's experience was so remarkable, and she was willing to share the story and help me write it. So we knew that her husband, Kevin, was such a remarkable man and the messages that he was sharing. So as a tribute to him and also in wanting to help people, we wrote the book.
And for our listeners that are new to your story, why don't you share with us, just kind of in a nutshell, what your book is about? We're not going to go through everything because, I mean, my goodness, there are parts of the story that just made me cry and other parts that were so heartwarming. But why don't you guys share a little bit about your story?
So I have an unusual skill set in that I'm able to facilitate conversations with God, deceased people, and people in comas for the last over 30 years. And Jocelyn's husband was following a brain surgery for brain cancer, went into a coma for 26 days. And Jocelyn, skeptic, not believer, sister just kept encouraging her to please just try having, I call them writings, only because I write down the conversations as they're occurring. And so she decided to do that reluctantly. And her husband, she can tell you a little bit more, but he thought he was dreaming. And through a session while we were on the phone, he realized he wasn't dreaming, and he began to rouse himself out of his coma. And the story begins there. She continues to have conversations with him. He gets better, then he gets worse again. So she has conversations with him as he's dying. He says his last goodbye to his children through my facilitation. And then after he dies. And so the book is it's a spiritual book. It's a love story. It's a wise counsel from someone who's actually going through this death experience, Kevin on his side and Jocelyn as the onlooker who's losing the love of her life. And it's a remarkable story with a lot of wisdom and pearls in it. Not just about death and grief, but how to live heroically and beautifully.
So, Jocelyn, how did you initially connect with Catherine? What was that like?
Well, Catherine was a friend of my sister Vicky's, and she had many writings, as Catherine shared with you. They're called over the years, where she'd gotten great insight and comfort. And when my husband was in a coma, she kept saying, why don't you do a session with Catherine? And I really didn't want to do it. If there was a God, I was pretty mad at him. I'd been praying like crazy, even though I wasn't religious, because that's what people do in those circumstances. And my husband was just getting sicker and sicker. And so I wasn't really interested. And Catherine is also a prayer chaplain. And she said, well, she can just pray with you. And I said, well, I really don't want to do that. And so it just took a while for me to finally decide I had nothing to lose. I mean, after 26 days in a coma, I just thought, what have I got to lose? So I went to give it a try, not really thinking anything would come of it.
Well, it's interesting how these things come together where we really have the right people at the right place at the right time that add to our experience. One of the concepts in Beyond Ever After is talking about heart-to-heart communication. What is that? And is there a difference between other types of communication that's done?
Well, heart-to-heart communication is something that arose during a session when I was doing the writing for Jocelyn, where her husband said that he could hear her better now in his comatose stage than he could in real life, in a sense, that he was listening to her heart through his heart. And that, I think at one point he said, the penthouse is closed for business or something to that effect, meaning his brain was gone. It was being taken over by the cancer, the brain tumor that he had that just went wild. And anyway, and he said, I can hear things about you that you can't even hear, which you read the book, Marianne. So, that really teased Jocelyn into, what do you mean you know something that I don't know about myself? But it's that authentic communication from our hearts instead of our heads. Sometimes, or many times, I have a background in communication, God's cosmic joke there. But we are always thinking about what we're going to say or how we want to say it, or we're coming at it from this massive brain, this what we call head-to-head communication versus heart-to-heart communication. And heart-to-heart communication is being your authentic self, not going into an interaction with this idea to win, to get your point across. It's just another form of authentic communication, but I think much deeper and much more powerful. We've had readers who have read our book who have shared with us that, they went into tense work situations with their colleagues thinking, this is going to be tough today. And they thought of, oh, no, I'm going to approach this heart to heart. And so they went in with a different mindset and more kind, more loving, more authentic. And the interaction went much better than they thought, much more positively. So, and I think that we all do heart-to-heart communication. We just aren't aware of it. We think of a friend that we haven't thought of in a long time, and we call them and they say, I was just thinking about you. And I think that too is a form of heart-to-heart communication, that we don't need just our voices and our ways of communicating, that there's something that binds and connects us all in this loving interaction with life. And I would say that's heart-to-heart communication.
And learning such a powerful technique in many ways, it really kind of elevates a person's experience, because when we, as you're saying, we probably do this, just really not really aware of it. If we're aware and doing heart to heart communication, I mean, my goodness, what a difference that makes.
And I believe that we're wired for it. We're designed this way. We just didn't know it. We just don't realize that. So your point about having more awareness is a great one,
Jocelyn, did you ever ask yourself, why was this type of communication happening with you and your husband, and just having this profound experience in this way? Because I'm sure it was obviously very heartbreaking on many other levels, but to have this, being able to communicate with your husband this way, was a gift as well.
Marianne, I have thought about that a lot, because I'm nobody special, and I've historically been a non-believer. I mean, I really hoped there was a God who doesn't. I just need a direct experience for most things. Part of it's my training as an attorney, and part of it's just my personality. I just one of those people that needs a direct experience, and I can't answer that why I was blessed to have this experience, because it's a 1 in a 10 million experience to be able to have conversations with someone who's in a coma, and then after they've died, and just that Catherine came into my life, knew my sister. I don't know. It's a blessing from God, and I think sometimes I think a lot of it was because of the story needing to be told. As Catherine shared, people who read the book, it affects them profoundly, and in always in a positive way. And if my husband's death has some benefit to other people, then it feels like it's less of a tragedy, because he's still helping other people even though he's gone.
Did these communications help you as he was going through that hospice process?
Oh, yes. When somebody's in a coma, they're just like a blank wall, and you don't know what is happening in their head, if they know what's going on, anything. And to be able to communicate with him then, and then also the book has 6 complete writings in it. And the first one is when he was in a coma. Then the second one, as you know, he was back in a coma. And then there's one at hospice and some other ones after death. And he was so grounded in his faith and not worried about where he was going. And he kept telling me that I'm not being punished, even though, of course, it felt like that to me, because, Marsha, it's all about me. And that his death isn't a failure, and that the arms of God and him are so embracive and expansive that I will always be held in love, and even when he was long gone. And so through this all, even though he's gone, I know he's not really gone.
Yeah. I mean, what I took away from your book is really when we have, loved ones and people we care about that are in comas, there's still a lot of communication that's happening. There's a lot that's being heard, and there's a lot that's being said too.
Absolutely. And, I've done hundreds and hundreds of sessions, and, that this idea of our consciousness being just in the here and now is a very limited, and based on my interactions with people, incorrect, small-minded one, because they can hear. A lot of times I have people that I'm connected with whose loved ones have already died. And in a lot of those sessions, they say to their loved ones some of the strangest things that they themselves were saying as the person was dying. And then they know not only that the person heard that, but they heard everything. So I would really encourage people to always talk and always connect. Although Kevin reported he didn't seem to be able to hear Jocelyn that well when he was in the coma. But yes, I had a woman who had a writing in her. She spoke to her grandmother, and she said, the first thing she said was, "It was just like crossing the street. Thank you for taking my hand." And of course, people cry during these sessions, and I'm not surprised by that. But she said as her grandmother was dying, and, a lot of people, it's a lengthy process, are arduous. And she said to her grandma, "It's just like crossing the street, Grandma. I'll take your hand. Just let me hold your hand and you can go across the street." So for somebody to tell a person what they said, it lets them know not only they heard that bit of the conversation, but all the loving goodbyes and all the tributes and everything, which is what people need to know, that their loved ones don't die alone or, go into a void.
Yeah, that's so important. My goodness, because we all will come to that, that threshold someday. What that looks like can be very different for everybody. And having the awareness and open-mindedness to know that there's more that's actually happening. I mean, in your book, you talk about the infinite love and connection that, we don't have to wait for that, that experience of the afterlife to experience that kind of connection.
Absolutely. And also, in the book, we share one of the writings that I did at hospice for Jocelyn and her family. And it was really Kevin's final goodbye to his children. He told them about his credo for life and all these things. And I asked Jocelyn, did you know this and that? And she said, no, I mean, I knew kind of it, but I didn't know the details that he went into. And I think that, yeah, why wait to say goodbye? We all think we have all this time, but at the end, and we all, it sounds trite when we hear this, love and the people we love are all that matters at the end. So yeah, it's about being that love, telling people what you feel about them, and in detail, not just, oh, I love you. Some of us feel awkward having those conversations, but it's really about sharing. If you can't, you're not very, you get embarrassed, send someone a card. And I appreciate that you did this and that, and that you love me in this way. And I recognize this about you. And so in that way, yeah. And all those connections, we know, like all our relationships, as we give life and animation to those and share with the other person, they just become more vibrant and alive, and that connection deepens. So that's the human person-to-person connection, but there's also this connection to divine love and kindness and other people. And, it would be a different world, and it is a different experience for us on a daily basis, the more we can live like that with each other and with those we love.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? We really would then take each day and really appreciate every moment that we have, and the relationships that we do have, instead of just be like, oh, I'll get to this later, I'll make amends on that later. I mean, if we look at things a little bit more from a love standpoint, I think it changes everything.
Yeah.
Yes,
definitely.
Jocelyn, you mentioned a little bit ago that, I wouldn't say skeptic, but you really had to have experiences happen to you in order for there to be a belief about it. And I get it, because I was very much the same way. I've had my own experiences that have led me to my own certain beliefs. How do you think that this has impacted your beliefs in general? And how do you feel about the afterlife and God now?
Well, of course, completely different than I did before. You can't possibly have this experience and not have your world axis shifted. In terms of my practical life, it's changed me profoundly because, one, the main thing is I don't fear death, and that is huge. I think most people, everyone fears it because it's an unknown. Even if they have faith, it's an unknown. And I'm not afraid of it. I mean, I certainly hope I live a long life and get to see my grandchildren grow up, and that it doesn't hurt when I get there. But I know when it happens, it's just a transition and it's not the end. And also, I don't sweat the small stuff like I did before. And even a lot of big stuff, I don't sweat that. And I know that I'm okay. And that even with all the little ups and downs that happen with myself or my children or interactions in daily life, that everything is okay. And I feel okay about myself in a way that I didn't before, and that I know that I wouldn't have had I not had this experience. And knowing too that Kevin and other people that I know I've loved to have gone before me are still around and still very much a part of everything, also gives me great comfort, because there are times when I do feel really alone without him. And then then he sends me a sign, and I know that he's still right there. For example, there's some music we liked a lot, like Brown Eyed Girl from Van Morrison. I always use that example because that was the song that Kevin always said reminded him of me because I have brown hair and brown eyes. And when I'm driving in the car and I just all of a sudden I'll think of him, the next song that'll come on my playlist is Brown Eyed Girl, even though I have, 300 songs on my playlist, that one will come up next. And just things like that let me know that he's still very much around. It really gives me great comfort. Well, and it shows up in such personal ways that when it happens to me, it makes me pause and look around and go, wow, everything is so much bigger than what is happening right linearly in front of me. And to live life kind of with that mindset is different for me, especially for me, to just know that there's so much more. And it makes me also infinitely more grateful for all the little blessings that I still have and that I often took for granted.
So, Catherine, and this is probably a question you don't get too often, but as somebody who has a level of giftedness that you do, was there something that you took away from this experience that impacted you, profoundly?
The experience with Jocelyn and Kevin.
Yes.
Well, we tend to be in relationships in our life with kind of like-minded people. And Jocelyn and I are very similar in that we're both really smart and we have wicked senses of humor. And I'm not just attaboying myself here, but, Jocelyn really did not believe. She really believed that God had singled out Kevin to kill him. I mean, that's how adamant she was, that he could take anybody, but he was taking him. And she was so angry, and rightfully so. She was devastated. And so to have that front row seat, because as you say, I hold it in a much bigger container, and I've never seen someone so, I use the example, won a fist fight, St. Peter, she was so just
mad.
Yeah.
Mad.
That's a gracious kind of way to say it. And so to see this transforming love, to see this woman who I knew and saw in the beginning to the woman to watch this metamorphosis, and her husband in all the writings has never been concerned about himself. Kevin, her husband, he's always been concerned about Jocelyn and her anger and her grief and her healing and her going on with her life. And to see that kind of attention, we know that couples do that, they love the other person and they sacrifice for the other person. But to see how that really was his goal and how he wasn't missing his life. You read the book. There's this whole God portion about new life that's beautiful. And so he's living it. And we've done several of these writings, I think maybe over 50. So it's this, never have I lived with someone and had such a relationship through my work over all these incarnations of the loss, the post-loss, the ongoing, to see her transformation and to see how much he loves her. And also, I have to say, this is his ability to love her from beyond. And so for me, the powerful part was I got a longer range view, and I also got to see an individual, a human being, transform very rapidly and very profoundly. And, we want that for everyone. And now, of course, I love Jocelyn and we're dear friends, but to see it in kind of a compressed and such depthful way, it just is remarkable. And the story in the book tracks that in beautiful ways. But to see the ongoingness of it and the reality of it is, God is great. Love is universal. We're always connected. And I got the practicum, the long shot view of that, in a way that I had never with my work. So that profoundly affected me. And one other thing is how readers are affected by this. And, we're not trying to sell books, but for people to come and say, I've always been afraid of death and I'm not anymore. Or I was devastated about the loss of my mother and I feel better now. I mean, to have you write a book in isolation, but then that book goes out and has its own life. And for what it's doing in the world, I just never thought about it. And I don't know if Jocelyn can say the same. I just never really thought. I just did it to be of service, but I never really thought how it was going to impact people. And I never, ever could have dreamed in the way in which that it has touched people, and the way they're fearful and the way they're hopeful and the way they love and their beliefs about faith and its power.
I think this book offers a lot of help for people that are pushing up against those boundaries of our belief systems. Could it, if we're pushing up against fear of death, or maybe even if there's an afterlife, what that looks like. And for people who have, gone to this place where they're like, okay, I know that my loved ones are, there's an afterlife. I know my loved ones are there. What kind of encouragement do you give them in order to connect with them, or what kind of, tips would you give them?
Well, I think that one of the things is also we are all having these sensations, all these experiences in our lives where we feel like we're connecting. We feel them with us. And many of us are kind of think that if you're going to connect with your loved one, it's going to be a ghost, or it has to come in your dream. And they're much more subtle, these connections and these signs that I call them divine synchronicities. Jocelyn calls them signs. But where we sense them, where we smell our grandmother's perfume, where, I had my lady who helps me with my house came yesterday, and her great aunt is in the hospital dying, and she went outside, and monarch butterfly came and landed and just died at her feet. And she was on her way to my house afterwards. She said, "Oh my goodness, what is that?" And she had it, and I said, "Well, it's transformation." But those kinds of things that we may dismiss, that I think the more we widen to it, the more they're able to connect with us, and that we don't go, "Oh, that's just a coincidence. Oh, that's my imagination. Oh, that can't be real." Give yourself that connection. You can speak to them, and a lot of people do, talk to their loved ones, in their own privacy of their own home, and trust that they hear you. And I think just the more that we're open to this, and the more we don't push it away and judge ourselves for thinking in an expanded way that my loved one, oh, they're here, they're helping me. And to not tell ourselves that's just wishful thinking, I'm just sad and that's just wishful thinking. Allow yourself to have it. And in my experience and others, the more you open to it, the more those kinds of things drop in. And so then the butterfly shows up and you say, "Thank you. Thank you. I'm not sure what this means, but I know this is significant. And thank you."
It kind of reminds me of a quote by Albert Einstein. It kind of goes with something to the effect of basically everything's a miracle or nothing is. And I think when we open our eyes and we're looking for, just looking at being open and looking for the signs that come our way, a lot more starts falling into place that way.
Well, it's, and we notice more, and sometimes it's out on the periphery. Sometimes we're just I got to get to my next appointment. Did I put gas in my car? The all the intricacies of living daily life in a modern world. But if we soften our gaze, just like, I love that Einstein quote. Thank you for bringing that up again. Then all of this is always happening. And if we're only with a telescope looking for one thing, I'm only going to think my dad's still alive or is still with me if only X happens. I'm praying for only X, and I only will accept Dad give me this only sign. Then that makes it a little tough on them to perform the deceased person. But if it's I love you, you love me, let's show me that you're still okay, or however you frame that, things that you can never imagine could happen. And it's much more wondrous and comforting and magical if it's not just this pinhole, X marks the spot, and only this experience is going to count. Because they'll surprise you. We surprise everybody in life all the time, the people we know,
Yeah.
So, and they have a lot more capabilities when they're in the afterlife than they do here to surprise you. So look for the surprises, I guess.
Jocelyn, do you still connect with Kevin through Catherine, or is this something that you also do on your own?
Well, I haven't had a writing in a while. And I can't connect with him, obviously, the way I can with Catherine. But like I said, he sends me signs all the time, and I'm still, very much aware of his presence. Since you read the book, you saw the thing about the squirrel. Well, it's funny because squirrels are like, part of my life everywhere now, and it's so yeah, I would say yes.
Well, how encouraging is that? Well, both, God, my goodness, Catherine and Jocelyn, it's been such an honor to spend this time with you. Where can people connect with you and be part of your communities?
We have a website, beyondeverafter.com. beyondeverafter.com, and that's the best way to just go there. We also have the ability, because so many people are moved to share their own stories, and we find that a lot of people are having these experiences and they've never talked to other people about them, and some of them are the most intimate and wondrous experiences. So we have a share your story opportunity on our website, so beyondeverafter.com, and then of course Beyond Ever After, a heart-to-heart journey through death and the afterlife. You can get that on readers can get that on Amazon. So
it's just amazing when given an opportunity to say, oh my gosh, I heard you talk, and I always dismiss these things, and now I realize that it was a sign or divine synchronicity, as Catherine would say, and so it's really wonderful for us to read other people experiences that are similar to what I've had.
But yes, we're just happy to be of service to people, and one of my goals is in writing the book was to help this not be such a taboo topic for people to be able to talk about it with their family members, and because it brings great peace and comfort and friends. So to open up this as a normal dialogue, because we're all having these experiences. So not exactly like what's in the book.
No, I understand that. I mean, it's a profound experience. Beyond After is a great book to read. Catherine and Jocelyn, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Well, thank you both. It was such an honor to spend this time together, and of course to talk about your new book, Beyond Ever After. Beyond Ever After is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and select indie retailers. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just what moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Friday and Saturday at 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.